You are the master of your fate. Let's begin. You want proof before you leap. That's why you're still standing at the edge, frozen in the space between wanting and doing, caught in the illusion that clarity will come before action, when in truth, the universe only reveals its next level to those who move without full understanding. I've sat across from hundreds of men and women who carried great ideas in their hearts but never brought them into the world, not because they lacked talent or vision, but because they demanded certainty in a realm where faith is the only currency that matters. They waited for signs, for permission, for someone to tell them it would work, as if destiny arrives with a stamped approval letter rather than emerging through the courage of a single step taken in the dark. And now, years later, they speak in whispers about what might have been, their voices heavy with the weight of dreams deferred, not crushed by failure, but buried beneath the slow suffocation of hesitation. Let me be clear, no one who ever accomplished anything of lasting significance began with a map. They began with a hunch, a whisper, a quiet knowing so faint it could easily have been dismissed, and the only reason it wasn't dismissed is because they acted on it anyway. I'm going to show you how your hesitation isn't wisdom in disguise, but fear dressed up as prudence, how every great soul I ever studied stepped into the unknown long before the path appeared, and how, before this conversation ends, I'll give you the one act that forces the universe to stop hiding and start revealing itself to you, not because you asked nicely, but because you finally dared. You were never meant to see the whole staircase before you begin climbing, and yet that's exactly what you keep demanding, a full view of every step, every landing, every turn in the journey, as if God or fate or the deeper laws of success operate on the principle of complete disclosure, when in fact they function on the exact opposite, trust expressed through motion. I've studied the lives of men who reshaped industries, rebuilt nations, and rose from nothing to influence millions, and not one of them started with certainty. What set them apart was their willingness to act on incomplete information, to move forward even when logic screamed that they were risking too much, because they had learned something most never grasped, that clarity does not precede action, it follows it, like light breaking over a horizon only visible after you've walked far enough into the night. Thomas Edison didn't wake up one morning with a blueprint for the light bulb fully formed in his mind, nor did he stumble upon success after a single attempt. He made 10,000 attempts, each one teaching him what didn't work, each failure narrowing the path toward what would. But here's the truth many miss. If he had waited for proof that it could be done, he would have never begun at all, because no one in his time could give him that proof. He had to create it through persistence, through effort, through the sheer refusal to stop moving. And that is the pattern repeated across every life of significance. The man who builds the company doesn't wait for market research to confirm demand. He launches, listens, adjusts, and grows. The woman who writes the book doesn't wait for permission from publishers. She writes it first, knowing that the act itself will draw the right people, the right opportunities, the right moment into her orbit. This is not recklessness, it is alignment with a deeper law, one I came to understand through decades of observation. Belief must come before evidence, not after, because the universe responds not to desire, but to decision, not to wishing, but to willing. You don't need to see the bridge to take the first step toward it. You only need to know deep in your bones that the other side is yours to reach, and that the moment you commit, forces greater than logic begin arranging circumstances, people, and insights to meet you where courage has placed you. Every year you spend waiting for signs, for perfect conditions, for someone to validate your dream or guarantee your success. You are not protecting yourself, you are training your mind to live in doubt, and over time that doubt becomes so familiar, so comfortable, that it starts to feel like wisdom, when in truth it is nothing more than fear disguised as patience. I once interviewed a woman who had spent over a decade planning a school for underprivileged children, gathering curricula, studying education models, even designing the building in her mind. But she kept saying she wasn't ready, that she needed more funding, more experience, more proof that it would work. Until one day she stopped speaking of it altogether, and years later on her deathbed she told a close friend, "I thought I was being careful, but I was just afraid." That story has played out in thousands of variations across the lives of men and women who possess brilliance, vision, and deep desire, yet allowed the need for certainty to paralyze them into inaction, not realizing that each delay weakened their inner resolve. Each postponement sent a silent message to their subconscious. This doesn't matter enough to risk. And slowly the fire dimmed, the calling grew faint, and what began as a sacred mission settled into the quiet regret of a life half lived. The tragedy isn't that they failed, it's that they never truly began, and in that space between wanting and doing, something essential died, their belief in themselves as agents of destiny. You see, hesitation doesn't just cost you time, it costs you momentum, it costs you faith, it costs you the very capacity to recognize opportunity when it finally arrives. Because after years of saying not yet, You begin to believe that greatness is for others, that miracles happen to people who were born with advantages you don't have, forgetting that every man I ever studied who rose from obscurity started exactly where you are now, uncertain, unproven, alone with a dream too big for their current circumstances. But they acted anyway. They didn't wait for confidence, they built it through action. They didn't wait for permission, they claimed their right to try. And that single difference, the willingness to move before the path was clear, is what separated them from the masses who remained frozen at the edge, still asking, "What if I fail?" while the doers were already learning how to rise. Faith is not something you feel, it is something you do. And the moment you begin to treat belief as an act of will rather than a fleeting emotion, everything changes, because you finally align yourself with the first law of spiritual success. Action must come before evidence, not after, for proof is not the foundation of progress, but its byproduct, revealed only after you've committed to the unseen path. I have watched men pray for wealth while refusing to risk a single dollar on their own idea, women beg for love while shutting down every opportunity for connection out of fear of rejection, leaders cry out for influence while avoiding the very conversations that would establish their authority, all of them waiting for some external sign that it's safe to proceed, when the truth is, safety is never guaranteed, and the universe does not respond to longing but to movement, to the quiet defiance of taking a step even when your hands tremble. This is not blind optimism. It is disciplined trust, the kind Henry Ford demonstrated when he launched his first automobile company with nothing but a vision and a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Even after 2 failures nearly destroyed him financially and reputationally, he didn't wait for investors to believe in him. He believed first, and in doing so, created the conditions under which others could eventually join him. That is how faith works. It doesn't demand assurance, it generates it. Think of it like planting a seed in dark soil. You don't dig it up every morning to check if it's growing, nor do you curse the earth for showing no immediate result. You plant it, water it, protect it, and trust that life is unfolding beneath the surface, invisible to the eye but real all the same. Your mind may scream for visible confirmation, but your soul already knows the truth. There are forces at work beyond your understanding, laws of cause and effect, of thought and energy, of purpose and persistence that begin to shift the moment you act from conviction. And this is where most people fail. They confuse silence with absence, delay with denial, when in fact the gears are turning, the connections are forming, the right person is about to enter your life, but only if you remain in motion. Because faith without effort is fantasy, and effort without faith is exhaustion. But when the two meet, when you move forward because you believe, not until you see, you enter into partnership with something greater than yourself, a current of intelligence and opportunity that flows to those who prove through action that they are ready to receive it. There was a moment in John D. Rockefeller's life long before the name meant power, before the newspapers wrote of his wealth, when he was still just a young man with a vision and a ledger full of debts, where he stood at the edge of a decision that would have broken most men, not because of its complexity, but because of its sheer audacity. He was about to risk every dollar he had ever earned, plus borrow heavily from lenders who barely trusted him, to buy into an oil venture that most called a passing fad, something unstable, dangerous, even foolish. And when I asked him years later what made him take that step when no one else would, he didn't speak of market trends or calculations. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "I can't explain why this will work. I only know it must. And if I don't move now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what God meant to do through me." That line stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, but because it revealed the inner truth of all great action. Belief is not born from evidence, it precedes it. And sometimes the entire weight of your future rests on your willingness to act before logic catches up. He didn't wait for permission from experts, nor did he delay until the risks disappeared, because they never do. Instead, he moved with the quiet certainty of a man who had learned to listen to something deeper than fear, something older than doubt, a voice that doesn't shout but whispers in the stillness after you've weighed the facts and realized that no amount of analysis can account for destiny. Within 18 months of that decision, the returns began to come, not instantly, not without struggle, but steadily, as if the universe itself had been waiting for his commitment before releasing the floodgates of opportunity. Investors who once laughed began to call. Partners who hesitated stepped forward. Doors that had been locked swung open, not because the world changed, but because he had changed. He had proven through action that he was no longer a spectator waiting for signs, but a participant willing to shape reality. And that, more than any business strategy or financial insight, was the real turning point, the moment faith became force and intention became impact. I tell you this not to glorify wealth, but to reveal a universal law when you act on a conviction that rises from deep within, not from ego, not from greed, but from a sense of purpose so clear it feels like duty. Invisible hands begin building the bridge beneath your feet. People appear who weren't there before. Resources flow where there was lack, and clarity emerges out of confusion, not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped resisting the pull of what you were born to do. Between the leap and the landing, there is a silence so deep it feels like abandonment, a hollow space where nothing seems to happen, where the world grows quiet, where no new opportunities appear, no voices of support rise up, no immediate reward confirms that you made the right choice. And it is in this exact moment, when doubt begins to coil around your heart like a slow-moving shadow, that most men turn back, not because they lack courage at the start, but because they misunderstand the nature of transformation. They expect the miracle to arrive the instant they jump, as if destiny operates on the same schedule as modern convenience. But I have learned from a lifetime of studying human triumph that the greatest shifts occur not in the spotlight of action, but in the unseen stretch of waiting that follows it. A sacred interval where faith is tested, where your commitment is measured, not by how boldly you began, but by whether you remain steadfast when no one is watching and nothing has changed. Henry Ford knew this well after his first two automobile companies collapsed, leaving him in debt and discredited. He didn't run from the dream, he retreated into focus, rebuilt the vision, and launched again with even greater resolve, though for months, perhaps even years, there was no sign that this attempt would succeed any more than the last. No investors came knocking, no headlines praised his persistence, only silence and the daily choice to keep working, to keep believing, to keep shaping metal and ideas in solitude, trusting that if he stayed true, the world would eventually catch up to what he already saw in his mind's eye. That is the pattern. The universe does not reward speed or showmanship. It rewards endurance, the quiet refusal to let go even when every external condition screams that you should. And then, almost without warning, the shift comes, not with a thunderclap, but with a series of small confirmations, a meeting that should not have happened, a letter arriving out of nowhere, a sudden clarity about the next step, and slowly the pieces begin to align, not because time passed, but because you remained in motion during the silence. You didn't demand proof, you gave proof, through your continued effort, through your unwavering stance, and in doing so, you signaled to the deeper laws of life that you were ready, that you would not be turned away, and only then did the hidden forces begin to move on your behalf. So if you are in that silent stretch now, if you've taken your step and see no results, do not mistake stillness for failure. This is not the end of your story. It is the forging of it. The miracle is not delayed. It is preparing, and it will arrive, not when you finally understand everything, but when you prove once and for all that you will act even when you don't. You must understand this clearly. The greatest obstacle between you and your destiny is not lack of money, not competition, not bad timing. It is the voice inside your head that speaks in perfect logic, dressed in reason, warning you to be careful, to think it through, to wait until the conditions are right, all while slowly strangling the life out of your deepest impulse. That voice will not scream at you like fear sometimes does. It will not come as a panic or a crisis. No, it is far more subtle than that, arriving as a whisper disguised as wisdom, saying things like, "Be practical," or "What if you lose everything?" Or "Maybe this isn't meant for you." And because it sounds so reasonable, so measured, you treat it as truth, when in fact it is nothing more than resistance masquerading as prudence, the oldest trick in the mind's playbook to stop you from moving by making hesitation feel noble. I've seen men with brilliant ideas talk themselves into silence over coffee, women with powerful callings bury them under layers of duty and doubt, all because they trusted the wrong voice, the one that calculates risk but never accounts for regret, the one that protects the present at the expense of the future. And here's what they didn't realize. Doubt doesn't always announce itself with trembling hands or sleepless nights. Sometimes it shows up as overanalysis, as endless planning, as just one more thing I need before I begin, and before they know it, years have passed and the fire has cooled, not because the dream was unrealistic, but because they allowed the mind's need for control to override the soul's demand for expression. The human mind is designed to seek safety, to avoid pain, to preserve stability, and that is necessary in some realms, but it becomes a prison when applied to matters of purpose, where growth only happens beyond the boundaries of comfort. When Edison failed 1,000 times, his mind surely told him to quit, but he had learned to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of conviction, and he obeyed the latter, not because it promised ease, but because it carried the weight of truth. You must do the same. You must learn to hear the difference between the part of you that wants to survive and the part of you that wants to live, between the thoughts that shrink you and the ones that expand you. Because if you don't, you will spend your life building walls around a dream you were meant to release into the world. So the next time you feel that familiar pull to delay, to reconsider, to be smart about this, pause, not to debate, but to ask, is this wisdom speaking, or is this fear wearing wisdom's clothes? And then, whatever the answer, take the step anyway, because courage is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to move despite its presence, and every time you do, you weaken its hold and strengthen the voice that truly leads you home. There is a vast and often overlooked distinction between faith and fantasy, one that has ruined lives not because people believe too much, but because they confused wishing with willing, mistaking the comfort of daydreaming for the discipline of true belief. And this error, subtle as it may seem, is what separates those who reshape their world from those who merely imagine it while remaining trapped in the same old patterns. Faith does not live in idle thoughts or passive hopes. It resides in action, in the deliberate choice to move toward a vision even when the path is unclear, even when resistance rises, even when no one else sees what you see. Whereas fantasy lingers in the realm of someday, tucked safely inside conversations with friends, written in journals that never leave the drawer, spoken of with longing but never pursued with effort. I've interviewed men who spent decades talking about starting a business, women who described their ideal life in vivid detail but never changed a single habit to bring it closer, all of them convinced they were keeping the dream alive when in truth they were only rehearsing it, like actors on a stage that never opens to the public. True faith, the kind that moves mountains, does not wait for perfect conditions. It begins before they exist, trusting that motion itself will create the momentum needed to bring the unseen into form. Consider two men, both dreaming of building a school for underprivileged children. One spends his evenings sketching plans, writing mission statements, imagining the ribbon-cutting ceremony, sharing his vision at dinner parties, yet takes no tangible step. The other, with no more money, no greater talent, simply starts renting a small room, gathering 5 children, teaching them himself, charging nothing, proving through effort that the idea can work, and within months, donors appear, volunteers come forward, space is offered, not because he had everything figured out, but because he acted first. That is the difference. One man wished, the other willed. One stayed in thought, the other moved into reality, and the universe responded not to his dream, but to his obedience to it. This is what I learned from studying Carnegie, Ford, Edison. They didn't sit around manifesting success in silence. They worked. They failed, they adjusted, they persisted, and in doing so, they proved their belief was not a feeling, but a force. God does not bless ideas. He blesses action taken in alignment with purpose, the kind of action that says, I don't know how this will happen, but I am determined to find out. So ask yourself honestly, are you living in faith or are you indulging in fantasy? Because if your dream remains untouched by effort, untested by risk, unchanged by time, then no matter how beautiful it sounds, it is not faith, it is escape. And the longer you stay there, the more you teach your mind that dreams are ornaments, not assignments. But if you are ready to cross the threshold, if you are willing to trade imagination for implementation, then understand this: the moment you act, the game changes. You are no longer just hoping, you are participating in your own transformation, and that is when the deeper laws of life begin to stir, drawing people, resources, and insights toward you, not because you asked, but because you finally showed up, not as a spectator, but as a builder. You cannot outthink your way into a new life. You must move your way in, because the universe does not reward contemplation alone. No matter how deep or sincere, it responds to action, to the tangible expression of belief, to the moment you shift from internal longing to external effort. And this is not philosophy, but law, as reliable as gravity, though invisible to the eye. I have watched men sit for years analyzing their next step, studying every angle, waiting for the perfect strategy, while others with less knowledge but greater resolve took imperfect action, and within months found themselves surrounded by opportunities, support, and clarity that seemed to appear from nowhere. But it was not magic, nor was it luck. It was motion triggering response, effort unlocking alignment. The simple truth that energy flows where attention goes, and when you act, you send a signal far beyond your own mind. You announce to the world, to circumstance, to the unseen forces that govern success, that you are ready, that you are no longer waiting for permission, that you have claimed your place in the unfolding of your destiny. Think of inspiration not as a map handed to you from above, but as a match struck in the dark. Its light is brief, fragile, easily extinguished by wind or hesitation. But if you act on it immediately, if you use that spark to ignite a flame, then the fire grows, draws warmth, attracts others, becomes self-sustaining. But strike the match and do nothing. Let it burn out in silence, and the darkness returns, not because the light failed, but because you failed to feed it with movement. This is what happened to countless men I studied who had brilliant ideas, who felt the pull of greatness, yet never followed through. They received the spark, but they did not act, and over time the impressions grew fainter. The openings closed, not because the universe abandoned them, but because they stopped proving they were listening. On the other hand, those who rose, the Rockefellers, the Edisons, the Carnegies, were not always the smartest or the most gifted. They were simply the ones who moved fastest on impulse, who trusted the nudge before it made logical sense, who sent letters before the pitch was perfect, who built prototypes before they had funding, who spoke up before they felt fully ready, and in doing so, set into motion a chain of events no amount of planning could have predicted. A conversation led to an introduction. A small project revealed a larger need. An early failure clarified the right path. None of it could have been mapped in advance. It emerged because they were already in play, not on the sidelines. And this is where most people misunderstand the spiritual path. They believe they must wait until everything aligns, until fear dissolves, until they feel called with thunderous certainty. But the call often comes softly, and it only grows louder when answered. The deeper laws of life, faith, purpose, divine partnership do not operate in stillness, they activate in motion. You don't find your purpose by sitting and searching, you discover it by walking, by doing, by risking the first step and allowing the road to reveal itself beneath your feet. So if you've been waiting for a sign, understand this: the act of beginning is the sign, the decision to move is the confirmation, and the moment you commit, not with perfection, but with sincerity, the universe begins arranging around you what it could not deliver while you stood still. I want you to do something that will feel uncomfortable, perhaps even irrational by the standards of the world, but deeply right by the measure of your soul. Within the next 48 hours, take one irreversible action toward a dream you've been holding back on, not because you lack desire, but because you've been waiting for proof that it will work, for someone to tell you it's safe, for the fear to go away, as if courage were the absence of doubt, rather than the decision to act in spite of it. This is not a suggestion, it is an assignment. A deliberate test of your willingness to align with the laws we've been discussing, to stop negotiating with hesitation, and finally step into the current of your own potential. Choose one thing, just one, that lives at the center of your longing, something you know deep down you are meant to do, whether it's starting a business, writing a book, ending a relationship that drains you, beginning a new practice, reaching out to someone who could change your path, or launching a project you've kept hidden out of fear of judgment. Then, before doubt has time to rebuild its walls, do one tangible thing that moves it from thought into form. Send the email you've drafted but never sent. Sign the registration, make the deposit, publish the first post, schedule the meeting, resign from what no longer serves you, or simply speak the truth aloud to someone who needs to hear it. Make it real, make it unignorable. And when you do, say these words not in pride, not in bravado, but in quiet conviction. I act now not because I see the outcome, but because I trust the force behind it. Do not wait for confidence. Do not wait for perfect timing. Do not wait until the inner voice of resistance goes silent, because it never fully does. Not for anyone, not even the men I studied who changed history. They didn't wait, they moved. And in moving, they discovered resources they didn't know existed, connections they couldn't have planned, clarity that emerged only after they had committed. This experiment is not about success as the world defines it. It is about obedience to your deeper knowing, about proving to yourself that you are no longer ruled by the need for guarantees, that you are willing to risk looking foolish, uncertain, unprepared, if it means living authentically. You may not get immediate results. In fact, you may face silence, setback, or skepticism, but that doesn't mean it failed. It means you've entered the fertile gap between action and revelation, where all transformation begins. And when you look back 1 year from today, you will not remember every detail of what happened next, but you will remember this moment, this choice, this refusal to delay any longer, and you will realize it was the day the tide finally turned, not because everything changed at once, but because you did. So set the timer, 48 hours, one bold step, and let the universe respond to the signal you finally sent, that you are ready, that you are in motion, and that you will no longer let fear dictate the terms of your life. Once you've taken that step, once you've broken the spell of hesitation and committed to action in the absence of proof, something subtle yet powerful begins to shift, not always immediately visible, but undeniably present. The quality of your days changes. The texture of your thoughts deepens, and you start to notice things you didn't before. A name mentioned in passing, an article that seems written for you, an unexpected invitation, a sudden clarity about a problem that once felt unsolvable, as if the world itself has begun to reconfigure around your new posture, not because magic has occurred, but because you have finally aligned yourself with the natural law that motion precedes manifestation. I've seen this pattern repeat across lifetimes, industries, and circumstances. The moment a person stops waiting and and starts doing. Invisible doors begin to open, not because they demanded access, but because their actions signaled readiness, and in response, people appear who weren't there before: mentors, allies, supporters. Opportunities surface that were previously hidden, and synchronicities emerge so precise they feel orchestrated, though they are simply the result of being in play rather than on the sidelines. A woman once wrote to me after launching her coaching practice with only 3 clients and no website she had spent years preparing, perfecting, waiting for confidence, until one morning she decided to stop hiding and simply began. Within 6 weeks, she was invited to speak at a conference she hadn't applied to, connected with a publisher interested in her ideas, and gained 20 new clients, not because she suddenly became more talented, but because she had crossed the threshold from intention into execution, and the universe responded to her courage by amplifying her reach. This is how it works. Action doesn't guarantee immediate success, but it does guarantee momentum. And momentum breeds visibility, credibility, and insight. You begin to learn what only experience can teach, where your message resonates, what kind of support you truly need, which direction feels aligned, knowledge that no amount of planning could have revealed. And even when setbacks come, as they inevitably do, they no longer carry the same weight, because you are no longer asking, should I have done this, but rather, what now? A small shift in language that reflects a monumental shift in identity. You are no longer a dreamer wondering if it's possible, but a builder learning how to make it real. The fear doesn't vanish, it simply loses its authority. You understand, perhaps for the first time, that progress is not linear, that growth happens in spirals, that every apparent detour may be a necessary redirection, and that the very act of continuing, of showing up again after silence, after rejection, after doubt, is itself a form of victory. So do not measure the success of your leap by instant results, but by the quiet transformation within you, the growing sense that you are no longer afraid of failure, that you trust yourself enough to figure things out as you go, that you are capable of rising each time you fall. Because that is the true miracle, not the external outcome, but the internal evolution. The moment you realize you don't need permission anymore, you are already the one you've been waiting for. Opportunity does not knock just once in a lifetime. That is a myth that has quietly ruined more dreams than failure ever has. Because the truth, which I have observed across thousands of lives, is that destiny comes in waves, not singular events, and it returns again and again in gentle, persistent rhythms, often disguised as small choices, fleeting impulses, or seemingly minor invitations that most dismiss as insignificant until one day they wake up realizing the door never closed, they simply stopped answering. I've spoken with men who turned down chances to meet mentors who could have changed their trajectory, women who ignored inner nudges to start something new because the timing wasn't right, only to spend years afterward haunted by the quiet certainty that they had refused a call, not from ego, but from something deeper, a pull so subtle it could easily be overridden by reason, yet so insistent it left a mark on the soul. And here's what they eventually came to understand. When you fail to act on the first whisper, the voice doesn't grow louder. It grows quieter, not because the universe gives up on you, but because it respects your choice. And if you show through inaction that you are not ready, it withdraws the invitation, not permanently, but for a season, allowing you to remain where you are until the longing becomes too great to ignore. But even then, it returns, sometimes in the same form, sometimes reshaped, always patient, always present, because purpose is not a one-time offer, it is a continual summons, repeated until you finally say yes, not out of desperation, but out of decision. I saw this clearly in the life of a young inventor I met early in my research, brilliant beyond his years, working in obscurity, who received a letter from Thomas Edison inviting him to collaborate, an opportunity that could have launched his career overnight. But he hesitated, convinced he needed more experience, more credentials, more proof that he was worthy, so he declined politely, promising to reach out when the time was better. Years passed, he continued working alone, and though he eventually found modest success, he never reached the level of influence he might have, not because he lacked ability, but because he missed the moment when alignment was offered freely, and by the time he tried to reconnect, Edison had passed, the window had closed, and the path forward required 10 times the effort for half the result. That is the cost of delay, not just lost time, but lost momentum, lost access, lost synergy with forces greater than yourself. But let me also tell you this. It is never too late to begin, because the law remains constant. Every time you respond to a true impulse, no matter how small, another opens behind it, wider and deeper than the last. Say yes to speaking when you're afraid, and soon you'll be asked to lead. Send the message you've been avoiding, and the conversation may unlock a partnership you couldn't have imagined. Take the first step without full clarity, and the next one will become visible only because you took the first. This is how destiny unfolds, not in grand declarations, but in daily obediences, in the accumulation of small acts of courage that compound over time into a life of significance. So do not wait for the dramatic sign. Pay attention to the quiet tugs, the recurring thoughts, the ideas that won't leave you alone. Those are not accidents, they are invitations, returning again and again until you finally answer. This is not about recklessness. It is not a call to abandon reason, to throw caution into the wind, or to act without thought. That would be foolish, and I have never taught folly. What I am speaking of is something far more precise, far more sacred, the quiet but persistent pull toward what you were designed to do, a calling so deeply woven into your nature that it does not arrive as a demand, nor as a crisis forcing you forward, but as a gentle insistence, like the first light of dawn that doesn't shout but simply begins to brighten the sky until darkness can no longer hold its ground. You feel it in moments when the noise of the world fades, during a walk, in the stillness before sleep, after an act of service, or when someone speaks a truth that resonates so deeply it feels like remembering rather than learning. It does not come from desperation, but from direction, not from lack, but from fullness, not because you are broken and need fixing, but because you are whole and meant to give. This is the distinction most miss. You are not being pushed from behind by fear, by debt, by regret, or by the pressure of others' expectations. You are being called forward, drawn by an inner knowing so subtle it can be drowned out by a single day of distraction, yet so powerful that ignoring it creates a slow erosion of peace, a sense that no matter how much you achieve, something essential remains undone. I've sat with men who built empires only to confess in private that they felt hollow, not because they lacked success, but because they had spent their lives answering the wrong summons, the one from money, from status, from approval, while silencing the quieter voice that whispered of purpose, contribution, legacy. And I've walked beside women who seemed to have nothing, no wealth, no platform, no recognition, yet carried a fire so steady, so serene, that you could feel the presence of destiny in the room when they entered, because they had learned to obey the call, not when it was convenient, but when it first arrived, even if it made no logical sense at the time. The eagle does not wait for the wind to rise before launching from the cliff. It leaps, trusting that motion will meet air, that lift will come not before flight, but through it. In the same way, your highest path does not reveal itself through endless analysis, but through faithful movement, through the willingness to respond to that inner pull even when the destination is unclear. You don't need to see the entire journey. You only need to recognize the voice when it speaks and answer it with action, however small. Because every time you do, you affirm who you are meant to be, and the universe in turn affirms that you are on the right path by deepening your clarity, strengthening your resolve, and placing the right people and opportunities in your way. So ask yourself now, not what you want from life, but what life wants from you. What gift you carry that feels both natural and necessary. What burden you bear willingly because it aligns with something greater than comfort. That is the call, and it is not forcing you, it is inviting you. Not to greatness as the world defines it, but to authenticity as the soul knows it. And the only question that matters is this: will you answer not tomorrow, not when you're ready, but now, while the whisper is still clear? So here we are, at the edge of decision, not because I've given you a new strategy or a clever trick, but because everything we've walked through leads to this one inescapable truth. No one remembers the man who stood at the cliff's edge, analyzing the depth, calculating the risks, waiting for someone to guarantee his safe landing. They remember the one who jumped, not because he was fearless, but because he moved when every instinct said to stay, and in that single act of defiance against doubt, he became something more than he was before. This is not about perfection, it's about participation. It's about refusing to let fear write the story of your life while your deepest self waits in silence for permission to speak. I have spent decades studying men and women who rose from obscurity to leave lasting marks on the world, and without exception, each of them reached a moment where logic ended and belief had to begin, a point of no return where they had to choose between the safety of the known and the possibility of the unknown. And what set them apart was not talent, not luck, not even intelligence, but the quiet courage to act before proof arrived. They understood what so many miss, that legacy is not built in comfort, not crafted in certainty, but forged in the fire of commitment, in the willingness to stake your reputation, your time, your peace of mind on something invisible except to the eyes of faith. You were not placed here merely to survive, to blend in, to wait out the years until retirement or relief. You were placed here to respond, to answer the call that lives beneath your fears, to build what only you can build, to say what only you can say, to heal, lead, create, serve in ways that bear the unmistakable mark of your soul. And the world doesn't need another spectator, it needs doers, men and women who will stop asking, will it work? And start declaring, I will make it work. So go now. Take the step, make the call, begin the thing you've been delaying. Let your action be the first real prayer you've offered in years, not spoken with words, but lived with motion. Because the miracle you keep waiting for It doesn't come before the leap, it comes because of it. And when you finally move, when you break the spell of hesitation once and for all, you won't just change your circumstances, you will become the kind of person who does not wait for permission to live. That is your birthright, that is your purpose, and it begins not tomorrow, not when you're ready, but now, with a single choice to trust, to act, and to let the universe catch you on the way down. Key takeaways and action steps. This is where reflection turns into resolve, where insight becomes action, and understanding transforms into movement. What you've heard is not meant to stay in your mind, it's meant to move through you and into the world. So before we part, here are the core truths you must carry forward, and the one decisive act that will change everything. Core principles to remember. 1. Proof follows faith. It does not precede it. You do not need to see the outcome to begin. You only need to know deep within that what you're pursuing matters. 2. Hesitation is not wisdom. It is fear disguised as caution. Waiting for perfect conditions trains your mind to doubt. Action, even imperfect, builds unshakable belief. 3. Faith without action is fantasy. Dreams remain invisible until you give them form. The universe rewards motion, not meditation alone. 4. The greatest breakthroughs come after silence. Between the leap and the result, there is a gap, not of failure, but of preparation. Stay faithful in the quiet. 5. Opportunity returns, but only if you answer the first time. Destiny doesn't knock once. It whispers again and again, softer each time, until you respond or until it walks away. 6. You are not being pushed by crisis, you are being called by purpose. That quiet pull inside you, it's not demanding, it's inviting. And every time you obey it, the path widens. 7. Your legacy begins the moment you act before you're sure. No one remembers those who waited. They remember those who moved and changed everything by doing so. Your assignment, the 48-hour belief experiment. This is not optional if you want real change. This is your threshold moment. Step 1. Identify one dream you've delayed because you need more proof, more time, or more certainty. It could be starting a business, launching a project, ending a relationship, speaking your truth, or beginning a new chapter. Name it clearly. Step 2. Within the next 48 hours, take one irreversible action toward it. Make it real. Make it undeniable. Examples. Send the email you've been afraid to send. Sign up, register, or pay the deposit. Publish the first post, video, or offer. Resign from what no longer serves you. Call the person who can open the door. Announce your intention publicly. No turning back. Step 3. Speak this aloud with conviction, even if your voice shakes. I act now, not because I see the outcome, but because I trust the force behind it. Step 4. For the next 7 days, write down what happens, not just externally responses, results, but internally how you feel, what you learn. This is how you train yourself to see the hidden hand of progress. Bonus, reflection prompt write. This now, if I truly believed, beyond doubt, that the universe was conspiring for my success, what would I do differently tomorrow? Write your answer. Then pick one thing from that list and do it before the day ends. This is your moment, not someday, not when you're ready. Now, move and let the miracle rise to meet you. Remember, your success begins the moment you decide to act.